Hi, Ramana. Maybe we can take you a little later because your voice is breaking.
Oh,
Nityanand, hello.
hi.
Vishnu, hello. Yeah, who's going to go next on the voice?
Hello, my name is Sudarshan Jain. I was the managing director for Abbott in India. Now I work with Healthcare Association, member of the board of multiple companies, and I got certified coach. I use the principle of coaching in various associations and dealing with the government.
Lovely to meet you, Sudarshan. Thank you for being here.
Hi, this is Dayanand. I'm calling in from Gurgaon. So I've been in the consumer goods industry for the last 30 years, sales, marketing, and in the last 11 years in general management. So delighted to be here.
I'm delighted that you're here as well, Dayanand. Thank you. Okay.
Hi, Maria.
Thank you for being here as well. Yes, hello.
Hi. I worked for about 30 plus years in HR, human resources in an oil and gas company. In the last 3 years, I'm into coaching and very passionate about coaching women.
Oh, fantastic. Well done. Well done. Okay. Lovely to meet you, Sujata.
Nice.
Thank you for being here.
Maria, may I
Yes.
suggest that we do the introductions on chat subsequently?
Yes,
because there are
please.
so many people who are wanting to hear you. I think we are going to run out of time.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
So I'll take your cue whenever you'd like me to start. Please go ahead and start the session. Thank you so much.
Okay. So friends and fellow coaches, welcome to the second year of the CFI Coaching and Leadership Festival. So Maria, yours is the inaugural session for the year-long Coaching and Leadership Festival of CFI. Welcome. Friends, happy to present Dr. Maria Pressentin. She's a renowned expert in servant leadership, and she's a strategist who's been working on eradicating workplace toxicity. We know how important that is. I mean, with all this talk of diversity and inclusion, yet the workplace toxicity has never probably been higher. Maria, welcome to the session and congratulations on just being selected as one of the top 50 global thought leaders. Guys, give her a big hand.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Manjira, it's been amazing. Thank you for organizing this so well. And thank you, Rich, for inviting me. I don't think he's here today because he's probably busy.
Yeah.
No, he was very,
He was very much there.
He is? Where are
Yeah.
you, Rich? I want to say hello.
Hi, Maria. Can you see me?
Yes. Rich, I miss you. Yes. Rich and I are ex-colleagues, but also long-standing friends. I have so much respect for this gentleman. And, when he asked me to join this session today and to deliver my latest research for you, I was just like, yes, no doubt about it. The challenge we had also with Manjira is to find the date, because I do fly quite a bit ever since COVID lockdown kind of opened up the countries again. I started to fly, and so I had a bit of challenge with the dates, but thank you everybody for accommodating and really, really grateful. Bridge, I miss you. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Maria, for agreeing to be with us. The way we would structure today's program is that we invite you to talk on what you understand about servant leaderships and how those concepts will be so relevant for us coaches in India. And after that, I'll ask you a couple of questions, and time permitting, I'll throw the forum open for other coaches to ask you as well.
Thank you very
Over
much.
to you, Maria.
Thank you very much. I do have a presentation to share with you. What I see right now is I'm not able to share yet. Could I get the rights to share?
Sangeeta,
You
could you
can
please?
share. You can ideally share. I have already given the
Okay.
rights.
Yeah, okay. Got it. Thank you. Can everybody see?
Yep.
Not as yet. Not as yet.
Yep.
We can.
We can.
Now you can, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So let me just organize myself on the screen. Okay, fantastic. So if I could just request that everybody mutes themselves. The way this is going to go is, this is the latest research that I've contributed, and this particular one is about to be published by the European Association of Researchers. And I've already got 2 books on servant leadership published last year. So it's been a year's anniversary. So that there's this continuing process. For about 10 years ago, I started of publishing scientific papers and also books on servant leadership. I am currently very, very focused on researching servant leadership application in Asia, which includes India. I have been invited recently twice to Dubai with universities, Middle East universities, to actually explore this concept in the Middle East. So it's quite exciting because I wouldn't have thought that Middle East would be interested. So there's always an opportunity for people to shift mindset, and it's all about shifting mindsets. When I texted Manjita and also Bridge about who is the audience, and they were saying, you know, all of you are very, very senior and very experienced people from organizations, and now became coaches, mentors, and so forth. So you're in the higher education and executive education. And I thought to myself, it would probably behoove me to give you something more substantial, which is core scientific research, rather than just talking a keynote. Because I think, you know, when I became a coach, you know, about 20 years ago, I also thought to myself, I need substance. So what I thought, you guys are very, very intelligent and you've got a wealth of experience. You're so abundant with so much knowledge. Let me give you the latest research, and then we can discuss on this. I still hear some background noise. So I would love for everybody to make sure that they are muted. Okay, if you could just do that. I'm going to go through sharing with you the research, but within the research, I have a couple of stories which are real corporate stories coming from my clients. So again, you know, those names that I'm going to be sharing are not real names, but they are real stories. All right, so welcome to our topic today in terms of servant leadership. I'm focusing on in Asia Pacific. And I'm actually focusing in Asia Pacific because servant leadership might not actually look similar to the US concept of servant leadership or anywhere that is Western European concept of servant leadership. I have studied all that research that has been done in the West on servant leadership, how it's applied. But then when you want to apply and create a universal mechanism of servant leadership in Asia Pacific, it's going to look very, very different. So that's the premise of my research over the years. How is this going to be different, and how can I actually apply it into our region? So I'm going to go forward. So in terms of the research, I'm not going to bore you with how I did it, but basically the structure of this whole thing, the key focus is, why is this study important? And I gave you a gist of the study reason. What are the trends in Asia? The central theories that I'm using on this particular study, the methodology, propositions, limitations of the research, significance of the research, and also potential implications. And again, with that, I'm bringing in some corporate examples. All right, let's kick off with an example. And this is a coaching example that has happened recently. So I've got two people on stage, right? So Peter is actually my client, and we've just ended the coaching contract. Now, the interesting about Peter is he's just joined a new organization, multinational, huge organization here in Asia. And Peter is an Asian person. And so it's Jenny who reports to Peter. Peter has been in the company for about 8 months, and he's built a solid trust culture within his own department that he took over. Jenny is an inherited person, like the other 5 people that he inherited, okay? So he's the new in the company. So, you know, they like each other. You know, he's been a really solid leader in terms of his leadership effectiveness. His skills are there. We've been working for quite some time together, and you know, he kind of knows when he has to be a little bit more directive, a little bit more supportive, stand back. Where does he have to build a certain culture that he needs to bring in, and so forth. So the people really like him already 8 months, okay? And people are growing, they're feeling great, you know, they're connecting, fantastic. Comes the time now, it's their financial year, new financial year. So they need to set a budget. So every single division under him, and he's got a huge department, have to set a budget. So obviously he's doing his magic in leadership, like who has to do what, right? So he gets to Jenny. Jenny is responsible in a division under him, a set of things. So she needs to take care of the internal company clients, which basically means her clients, hospitality. She needs to take care of operations under him, and she needs to take care of managing the budget as it relates to the center that he takes care of, which is an innovation center. Okay, so she's been doing this for 10 years. She's in the company for 10 years. Every day, the same thing. So it's the first time budget that Peter is going to go through together with Jenny. And Peter said, well, Jenny, you've been doing this work in the Innovation Center for about 10 years. Why don't you go ahead this time and set up a budget? You've got about 2 weeks to do this. So in 2 days, she delivers the budget for the entire year, for the entire Innovation Center. And every year, about 1,500 people go through the Innovation Center. Okay, so in 2 days, she comes back with a budget. He is getting ready to a business trip to the headquarters, so he doesn't have the time to look through the budget. So, oh, thank you so much for the budget. And he goes through the business trip, comes back. Next day, when he lands, the board is there and says, Peter, now it's your turn, show us the budget. Peter is ready with the entire budget. Jenny's budget, he didn't really go through very quickly, but basically he said, why shouldn't I trust Jenny, right? She's been around for 10 years. So he delivers the budget and he gets scolded as it relates to Jenny's portion running the center. Everything else was fine, actually. So he comes back to the office and he talks to Jenny and says, how did you get this number? Jenny was like, oh, you know, like 2 or 3 years of virtual COVID. So the last time we did anything in the Learning Center or the Innovation Center was, you know, 2019, end of 2019, and the prices have gone up horrendously. So I just put the realistic price in there, the costs, you know. Peter was like, but how did you get these numbers? There are a lot of numbers here, but how did you get them? Did you talk to the vendors? Did you get a pro forma? Did you get quotations? I gave you 2 weeks, right? So, but you delivered in 2 days. I mean, did you already have all those numbers ready? So, no, I don't. No. I'm just looking at 3 years virtual and you know, lockdown, and now all of a sudden everything is exponentially more expensive. So my intuition said this would be the new number. So Peter freaks out because he just got scolded by the board. And he says, Jenny, this is the most unprofessional budget that I've seen in my entire career. Jenny stops. She hyperventilates. She goes outside and starts crying. From then onwards, she's backstabbing Peter. All right, so I'm going to stop the story there. I'm going to stop the story. At the end of the session today, I'm going to come back to the story. So Peter took 8 months to build the trust, 3 seconds to disrespect. I'm not saying who's wrong, who's right, but the disrespect was built. So my research is all about, if you don't talk about respect, you can't build trust. You can't engage the people, and people won't be productive. The thing about respect is who should start first, and what does respect really entail? So this is kind of like the premise of my study, and anything that comes through with respect as the first touch point towards engaging the people in the organizations, if that is missed from the very beginning, the consequences are that trust, engagement, and productivity will either slow down or not exist. And there's a direct economic impact with organizations. So my question was, what is respect actually in Asia, and how can we make that happen? So as it relates to respect, if I look at, the industry forum and the industry research, so this is not scientific research, but it's industry data. If you look at this data, right, people are talking about what are effective managers. And number one, the top item that really fills up what is a effective manager really looks like is because 75% to 76%, they're talking about these are the managers that respect us first. So this was recent data, 2022, 2021. So respect is a big deal. So as it relates to the research that I did, I actually looked into all these countries, and I was trying to see where I could find data. So I went into Hofstadter's Insights, and I looked at, okay, there's one element in Asia that is very, very unique compared to Western world when you want to apply any leadership. So in my past record of publications, scientific publications, I did a lot of compare and contrast of different leadership styles, a lot of different leadership styles, and that was published. And based on that data, when I was working at that time in that kind of research, I also compared servant leadership with a lot of leadership styles. And I already looked at one single element or variable that was very, very prominent and important, which is the high power distance. So for those of you that know cultural dynamics from Hofstadter or Globe's research, there are a lot of 6 or 7 cultural dynamics that they compare and contrast. In Asia, the one that speaks very, very loudly, top 2, is high power distance, as well as collectivism. So these two mingled together, they make Asia exceptionally unique compared to the West. Therefore, if some of you might be cultural coaches and you might understand and agree or have a different opinion of what I'm saying, but basically we've got to pay attention to cultural dynamics. And these are the top 2 that I decided, okay, let's go for it, because leadership is going to be really, really different if you don't take care of these 2. So I looked at these countries in Asia. I went to Hofstadter's Insights. I was like, okay, to what extent high power distance is measured? And if you look at anything is above 50, it means we respect power, we like power, we grow up with power, we're comfortable with power, and we're a society that maneuvers with power. So legitimate power, we're talking about legitimate power. There are different types of power, however. So I said to myself, okay, if I'm talking about servant leadership, I better put power in there and do a lot of research with regards to power, right? On the leadership level, but also on the followership level. The followership is, for those of you that actually did research, followership is actually a thing, right? So today it's politically correct, and we in organizations would say team member or associates, right? But in research, followership theory is actually a legitimate topic to study, and therefore I plug that into my research. So I hope you can appreciate that. It's not me being obnoxious or anything. I'm just using scientific words. Basically, if we look at Asian leadership prominence, what we have a tendency to see in the work, in the research that we did, is at some level or so, it's very paternalistic. So we'll talk about what the characteristics are in a minute. And it's very fatherly or motherly like, right? The Asian corporate culture. But servant is very different. Servant is, we are peer to peer. Even if I have legitimate power, I seek hearing from you and so forth. I don't necessarily have to be the expert, and respect is always there, which might actually sometimes miss out when it's got to do with paternalistic overdrive. So how would that actually look like when we apply this combination in paternalistic societies of high power distance? So let's look at the characteristics of a paternalistic leadership style. It's benevolent. They mean really well. Leaders that grow up and deliver leadership styles out of Asia, they have a tendency to be really kind, and they start with a kind demeanor, and wanting to do well and do good for others. So they're benevolent. They want to also teach and live by example and operate by example. And there's a moral that you want people to learn from you. However, because of the seek for legitimate power, and it's not because leaders are like this all of a sudden today, it's because we are brought up this way. I mean, I was brought up in Asia. So it's very directive. My parents were very directive, very authoritarian. The teachers were very authoritarian. They all mean so well, and they want to show their lives, teach us by example. So the moral is always there. They're not necessarily there to listen to us though, because we're a younger generation when we grow up. So that's a little bit of a conflict. They provide protection. So in organizations that are imbued in Asia, and this paternalistic leadership style is coming through or exhibiting, then that protection is, I must protect my team. I must take care of my team. I must also take care of my team's well-being at home and take care of their families and ask them how they are. All that is there, but they also demand loyalty because I'm doing that for you. So if I'm a matriarch leader, a patriarch leader, I also expect you, unspoken expectation, informal institution, I expect you to be loyal. So that's part of the research that is coming through as well. Now, in contrast with servant leadership, we tend to already know this pretty well. It's empowering, it's developing others, it's very humble, authentic, providing direction when it's needed only, connected on the interpersonal level, accepting others, and actually accepting others to a point where how do we take care of our community, our greater culture?
First 755.
Sorry?
Sorry, 75579.
Everybody, please, 1 second. All participants, please mute yourself. Please, I'm seeing several who have not muted. Please mute yourself because we are getting background noise and conversation. Thank you. Back to you, Maria. Sorry,
Thank
apologies.
you very much. Thank you. And Sanjita, you could mute all actually if you wanted to. So, okay. So with that comparison, I went into the followership theories, and there was a lot of material there. And I was looking at how are leaders today. So in a typical, our organizations today are nimble, are faster because of globalization and outsourcing possibilities. So the teams are, depending on the industry, most of the teams are not that big anymore. And here's the interesting thing, right? We have all gone through this as corporate leaders, right? Yeah, can you mute yourself, please? Yeah.
Mr. Mahapatra, please mute yourself. Mr. Mahapatra, please. Sorry, Maria. Sorry.
It's okay. Thank you. Thank you. And so when we see this, when you're talking about management in the organizations, you've got echelons, you've got different hierarchies. And so middle management, they have to report to a leader and they also lead others. So they're both leaders. They have a leadership position, and they are followers. So this basically means they have two roles, but people don't realize that. Top leaders don't realize that. And so what happens, they know that exists and it's happening, but when they operate and work with their team members that also have team members, they don't realize that's important for them to recognize that they have power on their own, legitimate power on their own. And that makes a difference in terms of interaction. Leader of leaders. So these are leader of leaders, and that's the big thing that we're realizing in the research. So followers are also leaders. So what is happening in their very quick 3-second process when they have an interaction with their leaders, at the same time they're thinking about their team. So they're asking these questions, right? How do I see myself as how do I see my leader? How do I see myself vis-a-vis the leader? How do I resonate with this leader? Do I want to follow this leader? And does my leader respect me first? Because since you have a leadership position, are you applying leadership skills towards me? Am I growing under you and during every interaction? And do I feel well when I interact with you? And then what am I learning from you subconsciously? I'm going to apply directly with my team members. That's the thing that is happening. So what we see in organizations still today, believe it or not, still today, what we see in organizations is the 3 core characteristics of the paternalistic leadership is happening. It's still the mainstream. Benevolence is reducing because of stress and the need to create output and results. Moral, there's not so much moral teaching anymore, but the autocratic or authoritarian characteristic of paternalistic is actually exponentially coming out, and it's exposed. So what happens as a consequence is that the employees going through this during every interaction, they feel ostracized, disempowered, and lack of productivity. And so there's an economic impact on the organization in terms of low productivity, low performance, lower commitment from the people and engagement, and also the attrition starts to rise. So that's kind of like the trends. Now, why are people leaving? Because of toxicity, right? So there's different levels of toxicity. Some of you are experts in toxicity, a lot more expert than I am. But what I've seen so far is there are at least 3 scales of toxicity. There's the, in between the employees, talking and mingling and gossiping and backstabbing. There's a stress that is created, the moderate toxicity that is stress created. Hey, I need my report right now. I need it today. But you're preventing the employee or your team member to really deliver things on time and progressively. You're also preventing them to learn. There's no speed of There's no dedicated time for learning anymore because everything is speed. I want it now. You get a report right now, but then who's it going to serve? It's just to serve for your knowledge, but it's not serving for the greater good of the employees and the organization. Actually, you might not even have the time to read the report. And those people have just worked overtime for that report. So basically this analysis paralysis, being very critical, also some people are not confrontational, so they're passive aggressive, the other extreme. All this is happening in organizations as moderate level of stress. That being said, on the long term is creating lack of well-being in the organizations. So why are people leaving? Again, I found this data, more than 60% is because they feel that their leaders are disrespectful. And so there are other causes, of course, but disrespectful again. So I'm really curious, what is respect? So what are the key things that they're experiencing when they want to leave? It's not necessarily just money, right? Sometimes it's money, but more than 80%, it's because they feel it's dangerous to be in the organization. It's a lot of stress. It's not, everybody wants to give results and be productive and to learn, but they're not allowed to because everything, it's about control. Everything, it's about blaming. So they feel like they're useless. And so, and they feel like if they suggest any ideas, it's just not coming through. But if you are in an organization or working under a leader that is creating an environment that is really safe for people to make mistakes, be a little bit slow in learning, and really prepare them and plan for their growth properly, they feel safer and more comfortable. We're dealing with younger generations, and the older millennials are already 40, early 40s, and then you've got Gen Z coming up, right? And Gen A in a couple of years. So these people are actually in the organizations and saying, boss, I'm going to leave soon. You know, and leaders are like, are you talking to headhunters? Do you have a job? Do you have an offer? No, but I will leave. I'm pretty sure I'm going to leave. I mean, they are so blunt. I don't know whether you're experiencing this. I'm still part of corporate. So I see this a lot, still a lot. Some are more vocal than others, but they actually just say it out loud and they don't even have an offer. So what are they complaining about, especially the younger generations? They're saying, we don't like hard power. So in the hard power research, they actually say that there's these 3 types of hard power: reward-based, obviously, legitimate, and coercive. They just can't stand it. It's like, this is too much pressure, you know, especially the young people, we don't like that. The Gen Xers, they can still stand it, but, you know, it's not doing very well anymore. Gen Xers are also getting older. But the younger generations, they really want soft power, expert power, referent power, and information power. They want mentors, coaches like yourselves. They want referent power, which is influencing power. Influence me because I can watch you. I can observe you being a good leader. And I want to emulate you. I want to copy you. You inspire me. So that's like inspirational referent power, right? So they're looking for that instead. And they want a partner. Why is that? Because that fulfills the 3 basic psychological needs of a human being, right? Autonomy, relationships, and competence. So we have these 3 needs ever since we are born as children. And as we grow older, these needs are still there until we pass on one day. So let's talk about talent. What's happening in the field? BCG, a few years ago, in Europe, did a survey for 250,000 job seekers. So they're not employees yet, they're job seekers with the echelon of the generation of millennials. So they asked this one core question: what would it take for you to join an organization if you had a few offers at the same time? So these millennials said, it will take us this, top 4. If I'm thanked every day and appreciated by my leader, does my leader develop and care for me? Is it a supportive peer-to-peer environment that I'm joining? Is it meaningful work? And then there's a list, right? But these are the top 4. And I actually talked to the president of BCG in Europe. He's retired now. He became a coach. He had to get certified just recently. So I congratulated him. And you know, Rainer Strack, and he was telling me this is still going on, Maria, because we're constantly repeating this survey and it's still going on. And I said, would it be helpful if I supported you to do the survey in Asia? I'd really like to see how this would look like, right? And here's the interesting thing, number 8, it's compensation and perks. It doesn't mean that compensation and perks is not important. It's absolutely important, but the sequence of importance is, I deal with that first. If you can't pay me, I'm not even going to go for a second interview. So their first question is, how much are you paying? You know, so number 8 is, okay, I've got that out of the way. You're in my short list as a company now. I'm actually watching you. Okay, so in my interviews, I'm going to look for these 4 questions. So this is basically how they behave. So ultimately, what are they talking about? So 95% of 250,000 people said, this is the top 4 questions I'm looking for when compensation is already settled for me. And then the top 4 questions are going to make me decide on the company, because the culture is going to dictate whether I join you. How interesting. So if you look at why people are dissatisfied, primarily it's because leaders, they find leaders doing these kind of things, working in silos. It starts with working in silo. They don't want to share, they don't want to grow or contribute with their team members, but also with other departments. Team members really don't like it when their leaders are working in silos, because it makes them not have the power to work with other collaborators. Because some leaders actually block the beneath employees to work with other, cross-cultural functions. So empowering people is really important in terms of communication. And the other thing that is important is we've got to watch the generational shift. In 7 to 8 years, the Gen A is joining the corporate world and the entrepreneurial world. Actually earlier than, because some of them are already teenagers, they already have their own company. So we've got to watch it. We've got to watch it in terms of leaders, because they might not want to follow existing way of leading. So let's flip the coin. Let's change the energy and let's gear up. So let's look at how do we do that? It's a mindset shift. The treatment quality of our people results in the quality of our business. This basically means if we are able, sorry, I just clicked something wrong. If we're able to love our people is going to love our business, no matter what. So comparing and contrasting the leadership models. In the past, I didn't kick off with servant leadership. I actually compared and contrasted the most vibrant and obvious leadership models that were being expressed in Asia Pacific. So I looked at the paternalistic, I looked at situational. Bridget and I are pretty much experts in situational leadership, transactional, transformational leadership. They're all very relevant in our market, very, very, very relevant. But they're skills-based and behavioral shifts-based. And I don't know about your experience, but anytime situational leadership, for example, or transformational leadership is delivered in a workshop, there's always just a percentage of people that would adopt it in the long term. And then the rest would love it, love it, love it, but then they don't take it forward. That's because the mindset shift is not there. So what I discovered based on the research is servant leadership is very driven by mindset. And it's possible to shift people's mindset from a particular angle if you actually understand what servant leadership really entails. And it's not just the word servant. This word servant, you shouldn't take it literally, right? So servant leadership, if we took the definition from Robert Greenleaf and actually turn it into the modern perspective, it's the following. With the central motivation of serving others first, it is a single leadership philosophy steered by the followership theory. So this actually correlates and corroborates with the research that I've been working on, which is I focus a lot on followers. I always take my research from a follower's perspective to read what they need instead of taking the leadership perspective only. And so basically, if we look at this also on a research level, in the followership theory, there's a lot of mentioning of, the six to 10 elements of servant leadership, which means followers want that to happen to them and working with them. So here's the exciting part. The leadership process, the interaction between a legitimate, powerful leader, so a legitimate authority, and a follower will never happen. Leadership process will never happen if the follower is taken out of the equation. So the leadership process, in order to exist, it's an equation between leader and follower partnering. If the follower is taken out, the leader does not really have anything to do. So the leadership process will not exist. And with this kind of like spectrum of understanding what it entails to put this together as a research in Asia, I selected central theories for this research. Respectful leadership is research also. Servant leadership, there's a lot of research, 35 years of research of servant leadership. So I went back and I looked at all that was relevant to this particular research. Genuine servant leadership theory, which is the higher order of servant leadership. Followership theory, leadership process theory, paternalistic leadership theory, and tradition, cultural dynamics, and power, the theory of power, because it relates to this. All right, so just give you the schematics of research methodology. We screened a lot of papers and a lot of databases. I went up to 800 papers, but basically we had to select 103, and out of the 103, 8 were excluded. And then in addition to that, we did a lot of analysis and interpretation, and then we came up with key themes to work with and to analyze deeper. And so what is the schematic of the model that we're trying to exhibit here as we do this framework and the conceptual framework? So we're proposing in terms of the, what we're proposing in this hypothesis is the following. The leadership style, which is on the left-hand side, in Asia, is concurrently being launched with the need of servant leadership characteristics, influencing values of promoting justice, respecting others, especially the powerless, contributing to the development of others and well-being. And then the authoritarian, which is still mainstream in Asia, which is very directive, but it's not just directive. It's really a little bit beyond the directive. It's a little bit overboard sometimes. Influencing values is I mandate and please obey, and also tight control, tight supervision, less empowering, and then a consequence of sometimes punishment as well. Okay, so that is happening in Asia. We already saw that in one of my previous researches, and I'm really questioning. Okay, so if there's this combination, in order to achieve on the right-hand side, to the extreme of right-hand side, respect for leader outcomes, in order for the follower to respect the leader, because respect builds trust, what needs to happen? So that's my biggest question mark, right? Because when the follower chooses to respect the leader, chooses to follow the leader, then that leadership process is interacting. And so it also helps the follower become effective. And so when a follower looks and acts effective, is that the follower acts committed, is proactive, is focused on organizational goals, supports the leader in decision-making and in difficult times, challenges the leader's thinking, and advises the leader. So it's a partnership, right? So if left yellow needs to make orange on the right happen, what needs to happen in the middle? So that's my question, right? So again, looking at a lot of papers, a lot of research, we found out that followers today are in their own right leaders. And so they would question their self-awareness towards their follower type, their influencing power, their responsibility, their aptitude, characteristics, and capabilities. And so with that, when they're like 3 seconds thinking about these things, it's very quickly, they're looking at the psychological needs. Am I being fulfilled as empowered autonomy? Do I have relatedness or relationships with my leader? Am I connecting with my leader? And also, do I feel competent when I work with this leader? Am I growing, right? So in addition to that, how should a leader show respect? So from a previous research from Ekolov on respectful leadership, these are 19 up to number 19. These are the types of respect that was researched in Europe. And I decided to take that and replicate this study in Asia Pacific. And I added the number 20, giving face, because in Asia,
That's it.
Okay, I think it's best to mute. Okay, so the number
Mr.
20 is giving
Jesudas,
face.
please mute. Sorry. I'm sorry to call out names, but please mute.
Yeah, thank you.
Maria, carry on.
Thank you. So number 20 is giving face, and in India there's a different term in India, but they also have it like that. It's front facing, right? So basically the propositions is we're dealing with three codependents: leadership styles, respect, the leader outcomes, the function of the followers as self-concept, and also the function of the category respect, you know, so that we do that analysis. The theories, the study is very significant because we are contributing to close the gap of the theories and also value adding to the body of research in servant leadership, respectful leadership, and followership theories. Yeah. Okay. So why is this research a big question? Because of the trends that are happening today. So potential implications is, what are the cultural nuances that we can actually understand and apply servant leadership in our societies that are quite power-centric and paternalistic? So that's the main question, a practical question. And also, what are the optimal behaviors that managers, when they're learning leadership skills, need to learn? And some of the leadership skills are actually not incorporating those characteristics and behaviors and the mindset. And also, how can we close the gap of attrition, of sustainability of the workforce, and you know, just stabilize that a little bit, right? Because over generations, for the past 3 decades, it hasn't been stable. People are still complaining about the same thing. They can't keep people, they can't acquire people and keep them afterwards, developing them, and then, you know, there's so much money gone out the window because in 2 years they leave. What's happening, right? So those are the core corporate questions that I hear almost every day. So I'd like to take you to the findings of this research. And again, this is a research of several years in culmination, right? So these are the 8 countries where I could find data, and I interviewed a lot of people. And prior to interviews, there were surveys as well, right? Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and India. So these are the high power distance cultures that we worked with. We also looked at the 3 higher order genuine servant leadership characteristics. Servant leadership characteristics, they're like 6 to 10, depending who is the researcher that you are reading from. That being said, the higher order, which means you've got these 6 characteristics, but above it, the umbrella, it's these 3: humble, authentic, standing back. Standing back means modest. You don't intervene unless it's necessary, unless you're called to. So you're modest about intervening. And so in the 8 territories, societies that I've researched, this is the percentage of exhibiting humble, authentic, and standing back. Now, these are the categories of respect. So when I use the 20 categories of respect on top of humble, authentic, and standing back, how does it look like? This is the results. There's a huge opportunity here because, you know, relating to others on a personal level until acknowledging equality, it's very low. It's below 50%, and leaders don't really use this much. Occasionally you would have 1 or 2 that would do that, but so that would be an opportunity for people to advance in those behaviors. But what's really desired, and it might not be answered, it's that trust. You see, trust is actually number 1. So it's not about me trusting the leader. If I report to the leader, it's the leader needs to start trusting me first to show respect. So that's really interesting. So can you see the desired is this whole batch, and there's a huge opportunity to close the gap in terms of behaviors. All right, further on, what the research really looked like is two extremes, right? We looked at others serving, and if you're advocating for your employees and instructing and really using modesty in involvement, authenticity, and also humility, the quality of respect starts to increase. And therefore, the team members would want to follow the leader. But if you're self-serving and within the self-serving umbrella, you're really abdicating the power, you don't care, you don't ask, you don't connect with them. But at the same time, when you do connect with them, you're just controlling them, you're dominating. You create this sense of mistrust. And even if they were high-performing team members, they start to give up and they retrograde, which basically means they feel unsafe and they feel very stressed out having to manage up because they just want to contribute. Why do I have to spend time managing my boss that doesn't care? So the model of servant leadership, based on this particular research in Asia, it's a reciprocity in respect, but respect needs to start from the leader. The leader should not be waiting for the followers to respect them first. So if you have legitimate power, you've got to find ways to respect and build trust. Building trust is to trust them first. So there are, so it's a lot of, hey, if I've got legitimate power, I'm expected to give these behaviors first. Yeah. Because when you are able to give these behaviors and you are really looking at how much involvement you're getting in, you should also learn from them, not just telling them what to do. You should entrust decision-making to them, and becomes an environment that you're creating as a leader that is mutually respectful and safe for them to work in. Now, this is the compass. It's like it's like a compass for the leader. If you want to contribute value rather than being operational and doing their job, your expertise shifts to becoming a coach, to becoming a mentor, to becoming an advisor where it's necessary, and becoming a team pillar, but at the same time, a team member. This is what's expected of the leaders nowadays in Asia, yeah? And I just wanted to pick out some of the things that they told me in the research, and it created a really big theme out of it. So as it relates to trust, if you see the respect built by trust, right? Because, I looked at each of the 20 elements, how do they build respect? And trust is the top one. So I picked out trust to talk to you about. And they said, I trust my leader if tangibly we can see and feel and hear competence from our leader. That's the extra, right? The extra stuff that they're looking for. The leader has to have a functional expertise. Okay, otherwise, I'm not going to be interested, because I want to learn from the leader. We need to be compensated really generously, and celebrate culture, cultural events and stuff like that. The leader has to have a position power. You see, in Asia, we want that. And please connect with me on a one-on-one basis, because many of us are introverted. I don't feel comfortable talking goals or whatever about myself in a team meeting. You can have all the team meetings you want, but I also need those one-on-ones. And externally, you must have a good reputation. And if you don't yet have a good reputation outside, we want to see that you are building one. We want to see that you are improving yourself. We want to see that you are grooming yourself. So you groom us, but you also have to groom yourself, because otherwise I can't look up to you. So that's what is expected in the high power distance societies. The subjective side, the extras that they want, apart from the 20 respect categories of behaviors. They said, I want a leader that creates in a team a sense of belonging, has moral values. You as a leader have to have moral values. I don't have to agree with them, but at least I can see that you're walking a path with values, and you walk your talk. People, they think of people before profit, but you need to at the same time know how to make profit for the organization. You've got to be inspiration and charismatic, which is related to the tangible. You've got to be a friend to us. You've got to trust us. And you need to believe in yourself. If you are not confident as a leader, please, that type of thing, right? So the next thing, I also looked at face giving, which is the number 20 of building respect. Again, these are the two core ones that I want to pick out. Face giving definition is honoring people's opinion in public, even if they don't agree or make a mistake. So you're not embarrassing others. So it's a saving embarrassment strategy in a lot of societies, and saving the image of others publicly and protecting one's identity in the society. So really, because it's power distance, right? If I'm a leader, I have power, but I also want to save your personal power, save your face, right? So face saving or saving face or face giving, it's the term that is used in China, Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, and Taiwan, and front-facing is in India. So those are the two things that picked out really big time. And then let's look at the implications of the study and what do we recommend as actions. And sort of like five folds. Followers accept hierarchy, but don't follow blindly. So I still remember very clearly one of my interviewees. So everybody that I interviewed come from multinational organizations or very large corporate organizations from in countries. And they are leaders, but they are reporting to leaders, right? So they were saying, hey, this particular one was really, I could find a trend on this, and they were saying, yeah, if you inherit us, if you're my boss and you inherit us, I'm going to take some time to see if you are worth following. So I'm not going to follow you blindly just because you've got a position power. And I've got people in Malaysia, very high power distance country, China, Hong Kong, Singapore, telling me this. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing, right? So the coin is flipped. Well, I don't think we can go back anymore to being, the older generation, where the corporate world is, I tell you, don't challenge me, and this is how we're going to go forward. Coaches, you all understand what I'm talking about. So why is it that I'm so passionate about this research, and I wanted to share it with you, because you can actually take it forward and apply it in your coaching sessions and say, hey, this is outdated. You guys, you have got to pay attention to this. So the second point is organizational design of future organizations. In terms of succession, you've got to build in development. If you don't build in development as a strategy of organizational design, you're backwards. Because everybody that is look at the BCG 250,000 people surveyed, right? If you are not going to develop me, I'm not going to, that's one of the top four things, right? I'm not going to be interested in talking to you as a company, even if you pay what I want. So that's the point number two. And then this is a nice trend. And number three, I would die for my leader if my leader serves me. And I want to copy my leader and I want to be even better than my leader to serve my team members. And this came from countries that are high power distance. And these guys are telling us this. The culture of respect for sustainability over the long term, major organizations that were 100 years old, they are dying off because they're not agile to shift the mindset anymore of the leaders, right? So if you coaches, mentors, advisors, you can influence your clients to shift their concept of leading. this is going to contribute to the sustainability of organizations, because people don't leave organizations. Organizations mean good most of the time. They leave leaders that don't have leadership skills, or rather they leave managers that don't have leadership skills. I don't even blame that I actually don't want to go into the direction, oh, some of the leaders are very bad. No, I don't actually believe in that. I believe people want to do good and want to contribute. What I have seen, however, the past 20 years in learning and development is that leaders don't have leadership skills, that's all. But once they apply and they shift, they cross that bridge that, oh my gosh, it's so difficult to change my leadership style. Once they cross that brick wall and they dismantle the brick wall, and they start to see, oh my gosh, I can actually be flexible in different leadership styles. I can actually use servant leadership or something else. They start to see that they're very effective, and there were never bad human beings. It's just this crossing over. So also, if you shift leadership styles more towards the serving type of leadership style, if you look at these arrows, right? If you start with internal leadership serving others, the quality of engagement with people increases. People be satisfied in coming to work and being more productive. And so they actually exhibit satisfaction of loving the organization when they're dealing with customers and third parties outside. And therefore, that revenue and productivity is going to show up. So let me, based on this research, share with you what is the schematic to make servant leadership quite easy. Now, Dr. Ken Blanchard, who was my mentor for many years on servant leadership, and we talked a lot about this, he initiated by saying it's the pyramid upside down. And I wondered, how would that look like in Asia? So now I've got the research and I shared with you the findings, right? It's a bit different than what he says. In Asia, you need to have that power. And we are not, in the next 20 years or so, going to give up high power distance, because we are a lot of people in Asia. So the practice of servant leadership in Asia is who gets to decide when, and it's a mingle of leadership process, which means sometimes the follower decides, sometimes the leader decides. And when we work in tandem, in partnership, the practice of a servant leadership is actually twofold. It starts with respecting that you're a follower, but respecting at the same time that you are a leader of your own right. Could be expertise leader, could be people leader because you have your own team. And you are more relevant than me if you report to me, because you're still operational and you are closer to the customers or partners or whatever that you take care of. And so with me being a little bit on a higher impact, I need to support my expertise shifts from functional expertise to leadership expertise, which means I need to be flexible to learn behaviors to help you, follower, be successful, which means being authentic, being humble, being modest, and intervene with different combinations of categories of respect behaviors to work with you. Sometimes you decide, sometimes I decide, sometimes we decide together because we're both learning. So it is important for us to understand that everyone matters. And we should always wake up every morning and think about, wouldn't it be fantastic if every morning for everybody on earth that worked was exciting for them? They become proactive. They look forward to going to work. Work doesn't feel like work. They are overperforming because they want to, they choose to, and they're supportive of each other. So part of the research that came through as findings is we can do that if we are servant leaders, but at the same time, we are inclusive. We don't see followers as followers. We see them as our peers. So there's this thing in research that there's another research that I added to this, the inclusive servant leadership. And so there's another model, but basically servant leadership is in the best position to be an inclusive leader as well. It's the low-hanging fruit leadership style that gets inclusiveness fast-tracked in the organizations. People become more performant, engaged. They start to have more independent thinking because it's empowered to them, and their voice shows up. So what should leaders should be doing? What do leaders should be doing? Work through others. This we already know, right, coaches? And learn to show up with understanding and being involved when it's necessary, but only when it's necessary, right? Invited. Spend generous time with people, understanding them and supporting them. And sometimes you don't need to speak. You just need to listen to them. And then really challenging yourself, what are you listening for? Are you listening to be right as a leader, or are you listening to help them move forward, which is what coaches do? So be clear about performance expectations, be very clear in terms of what's expected of them, because if they're not clear, that's the number one cause of why people want to leave, because leaders are unclear, they're dodgy, they don't have a sense of direction. And so how can you lead me, right? So I don't want to follow you. And give constant feedback. People actually want feedback, but the problem is leaders also need to receive feedback, and you've got to be open ears for that. And also addressing performance issues immediately, because people actually like that, but in the most loving way possible. Showing confidence in the people, help them make decisions that are right, teach them how to do that, build an environment that is self-reliant, be transparent with them, getting them in on things, and be aspiring in learning things. So at this point, I've done my work on the presentation, and I'd really love to hear any questions, comments. I see that on the chat there are like 14 items.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you
very
for a lovely session. Before I throw open the floor to other participants, there were a couple of questions I had to ask, which I've kind of culled from some of my other fellow coaches.
Yes.
The first question being, the terminology that you use in Asia, you know, with our long-standing traditions of having a very clear master-servant, what should I say, distinction, where the servant by nature of the nomenclature is subservient.
Yes.
Why was this particular name chosen? That a servant leadership instead of a collaborative or a, you know, equalized relationship?
Yes, that's an awesome question, and it makes a lot of sense. And that's one of the reasons that I thought, hey, this is weird, so it's good to research. So based on my humble research, right? Because servant leadership is there for 40 years now. The research data started about 35 years ago. So we have 35 years of scientific data. And again, servant leadership is Robert Greenleaf, right? So he's not a researcher, he's not an academic. He read a very nice story one day, and he said, it's a little bit like Martin Luther King. He said, wouldn't it be fantastic one day if we were all serving each other? And so he came up with the book, Servant Leadership. I have it here. Somebody needs to mute, because I think I'm hearing myself and somebody else. Manjira or Sanjita, can you mute everybody? Because it's quite easy.
Sangeeta has to mute. I am not able to. I sent a message to Sangeeta too.
Yeah.
Maria, can you stop sharing screen, please?
Yes.
Okay, once again, may I please request everyone to mute other than whoever is speaking? Thank you. Yes,
Okay.
Maria, sorry. Back to your question. That's a very interesting answer.
So Robert Greenleaf writes this book, but of course it's not research. He used to be a corporate leader in, I think, AT&T or something, but he had a dream. And he said, wouldn't it be fantastic if we as leaders served? Because he actually saw in those days, when he wrote the book, he saw the world pretty much, it's going to be harsh, yeah, but he saw the world dying in the worst possible manner. And he was like, people are fighting each other. People are in the spectrum. If you are talking about war in between countries, there's war within organizations. So war, it's fighting. It's not healthy discussion. It's, I don't agree with you, so I'm going to attack you. And of course, he's from the US, right? And then there were riots. And there was a lot going on when I read why he was talking about servant leadership. So again, you know, he's another generation. I didn't get to meet him. I did talk to Dr. Ken Blanchard about it because he met him when he was much younger, before he passed on. They used to have dinners together. I said, and he used to tell me, and he said, there was a lot of chaos in the US. And if you listen to news on the radio, in those days it was radio, right? It was like the whole world is in chaos mode, you know? So and he was like, I've got this dream, which is to serve each other. And maybe those words collaborative, it was just not sexy at that time, you know? So that came through and it became servant leadership. And then it didn't catch on until a decade later. And then there's a lot of researchers that say, hey, wait a minute, there's something interesting here. Let's look at the weird side of what servant really means. That got clarified. Now, Dr. Ken Blanchard, again, in my just one-on-one discussions with him, he says, and he tells this to everybody, right? When he used to do keynotes, he would say, serving, again, I'm putting words in his mouth, right? But the way I learned it from him is serving, the leadership is the direction, and serving is to grow others, to develop others, right? So adding to what he's saying, I would say, and based on the Asia Pacific research, it is a partnership. You cannot not have that partnership. It's actually equal partnership because leadership is not a position. You are a manager, which is a position power in the organization. You might not have leadership skills, so I don't want to follow you. If you have leadership skills that happen to corroborate with characteristics of a servant leader and you're respecting me this way, I'm more likely to follow you and emulate and learn from you and use it in my team, with my team members, because you're creating an environment that is safe for me to work with you and it's stimulating. So therefore, I don't have the power to change the word servant leadership because it's stuck, right? And I think if you change the mindset and see servant not literally as subservient, servant is actually the power of giving.
Okay.
That's
Right.
going to be a lot more fascinating to work with as a, you know, servant leadership as a style.
Lovely, Maria, lovely. Just another quick question. When we read about servant leadership, the examples which are quoted are Gandhi, Mother Teresa. I'm not finding any quotations about any corporate leaders who can be cited as servant leaders. You know, they are collaborative leaders, they are developmental leaders. So in your mind as coaches, when we give examples, who are the successful corporate leaders who you would term as servant leaders?
That's a great question. I can't think of anyone. There might be a lot, but here's the thing that I would like to challenge our forum today, but also take it forward and challenge somebody else that asks you the same question. This is how I see it.
Bridge, would you like to add something? Bridge or Suresh, who have had long experience of working with corporate leaders and, coaching CXOs, CEOs. Do you see anybody in the Indian context who you would, term as a successful, servant leader? Chand?
Manjura,
Yes.
one person whom I have interacted briefly, I've not worked in that organization, is Kumar Mangalam Birla. The way he behaves with executives. I have had a 5 minutes interaction with him, but to the CXOs, CEOs of that group whom I have coached and interacted, or with some other people who have interacted with him, I think he behaves very, very decently and differently with everyone. But this is just heard, not first.
Yeah. I want to say same thing. I am from Aditya Birla Group, worked with Ultratech Cement. I had interactions with Kumar Mangalam Birlaji also. In fact, I wanted to say the same way. The way most of the things Maria was explaining, I remember he gives complete freedom to the people and tries to get more from bottom up culture, and excellent leader. So I can tell 25 years I worked in that group, Aditya Birla Group. Thanks, sir. Thanks for reminding my boss.
Oh, very good. Thank you, Raman. Thank you, Ramana. Yeah. Oscar, you had a question. Oscar, you're on. Yes, please, Oscar.
Yeah. Maria, thank you so much for that presentation. I think it was
a wonderful
exposition of looking at it from the perspective of leadership and followership. I've got a slightly different question on a different space by looking at it from the point of view of the peer. And in a large diversified conglomerate, there could be many business leaders, each of whom have their own set of followers and so on, and have their own sets of responsibilities. And there are other corporate leaders as well. If the dominant culture in that organization is strongly paternalistic and autocratic, one of the fears of, and I faced this as a coach, one of the fears of a leader who's wanting to change, even incrementally or even, seamlessly towards servant leadership, is how will I be perceived by my peers? I don't have a problem with how I will be perceived by my boss. I don't have a problem about how I will be perceived with by my followers, because it's going to work for me. But how will I be seen by my peers? Will I be seen as soft? Will I be seen as someone who's passionless? Will I see me as someone who is not committed? And that's something that I've grappled with as a coach. And I've come across multiple leaders from, maybe I worked with a lot of very strongly paternalistic organizations, and who voice that. And I was very interested in hearing from you, your perspective, if you've come across such an issue and your thoughts on it.
Yes, thank you so much, Oscar. That is so relevant. And that's why I did this research, and I'm continuing. The next step after this research, I'm actually going to study politics. So leadership with politics. So that's kind of like, I don't know where I'm going to find the time, but that's kind of like my intention. I'm already putting out in the universe because it's so relevant, right? My personal experience, I'm a professor at Reading University, but I'm also in the corporate, and obviously a consultant as well, right? But I'm in the corporate, and one of my peers was saying, well, I inherited, I'm giving you a real life example right now, okay? My peer, still in the company, went to another department, and we were doing handover, like I've just inherited also her team, right? And she's been with the team for, I don't know, 15 years, I don't know. So I'm inheriting this very, very, very experienced set of professionals. But I have a different take how the culture should look like. So what does Maria do? So I do, I learn a lot, I learn a lot and stuff like that. I don't change much, right? Because we're all change consultants. So we need to eat our own medicine. And after a while, like you said, progressively, very little by little, where it's necessary. And even they told me, my team members told me, we need to change here. We need to. So I changed what they thought was necessary to change. So it's quite subtle. I'm not going to go in there and like, blah, 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 so I know, right? So they started to say, like, some of them were crying about the old leadership. My predecessor, again, she's amazing human being, right? But it was a different style. And so, my team members are saying, we want this. So I didn't instill anything except for taking what they wanted, because I believe in one-on-ones, right? So we're constantly doing one-on-ones, and they're like, I want this, I want this, I want this. And it was all fitting to servant leadership. They don't know what is servant leadership. And I will not use the word because the organization is quite authoritarian. But this is where I believe spiritually, in my experience, I'm put in situations that are not that easy because I know I have a job to do. I have a difference to make in these people's lives. So I don't call it servant leadership. I maneuver in the organization with servant leadership. They are so happy now. They're talking about, wow, it's a breath of, a new life. It's, oh my gosh, they're motivated. They are taking charge. I'm learning from them, and they're doing that. So my peers came to me and said, what are you doing? You're so different from, I said, yeah, I'm a different person. And I just do things differently. I'm just building a different culture because it's a culture that they want. That's really it.
Nice. Nicely done. Satinder, next question to you, please.
Maria, amazing set of thoughts you put in front of us. Really appreciate that. The question I have for you is, because you mentioned that servant leadership practicing is a combination of appreciating the followers' world as well as the leaders' world. So my comment is, and I want you to react, is that one has found that when we look at CEO and his immediate level, because the awareness levels are very high, you find great examples of CEOs practicing that concept with their first level, and you find rich experiences. But what is happening is because the organizations are increasingly becoming flat, the next level has to deal with a lot of grades of talent as well as diversity of talent versus what the CEO ends up directly dealing with. So the level of awareness of followers that the next level ends up dealing with is hugely diverse. And that is where, in my personal experience, I found servant leadership breaking. What's your experience?
Yes. My experience is a little bit, we need to stand back a little bit. Our education system, selective schools, and I'm talking about our children, selective schools are teaching behavioral science or, listening, really a little bit of coaching skills. How do you ask open-ended questions, that kind of stuff, right? How do you interact with each other? How do you respect with each other? So only nowadays schools are teaching this, but not all schools. This is not mainstream. Now imagine, Satinder, you have the generations that are already in the organization, let's say the younger generation. They didn't learn this at school. It's still quite hierarchical when they went to school, right? And they come to organizations, what are they going to copy? My teachers. I'm going to copy my teachers. My boss is like this, so I'm going to copy my boss. So if I change organizations, a particular organization where the CEO is really trying to implement the good values and characteristics of servant leadership, you're lucky, but we've got to support with development from bottom up.
Mhm.
The problem is we never have budget from bottom up. It's always top down.
Mhm.
And so
Yes.
shifting the mindset from older generation is already very difficult unless the CEO is enforcing it. So the bottom up, because the schools don't teach, behavioral science skills, what happens is that there's a havoc, there's a gap there. And the next time they become leaders, we continue to be very autocratic.
Mhm.
So the development budget, part of that's why I did mention this on the PowerPoint as well, right? If you mean to apply servant leadership, and when you're hiring, no matter what generation, especially the younger talent generation, why is there a talent war? Nobody wants to join the organizations because they're not being developed and they already know there's no budget. Part of the questions they ask HR directors when they're interviewing or hiring managers is like, what's the budget for me to get developed? That's a straight on question. Okay, you don't have a budget for me, forget it, I'm not coming. So that's it.
Absolutely.
Good point. Very good point. Good.
Yeah, so thank you so much. Yeah.
Chant wants to ask the next question, but before I permit him to ask the question, I'm going to ask him a question. That Chant has been a very well-respected CEO in his time. So what were you? Were you a servant leader ever, Chant? By whatever name?
Okay, so thanks, Manjeera. Let me try and answer that. In fact, I had a comment. So, I used to work for a large corporate conglomerate called ITC. It had 13 businesses and therefore 13 CEOs. Okay. Now, the thing is, if you are heading one of the businesses for your team and your stakeholders, you become the company for that team, right? I found that there were vast differences in leadership styles amongst 13 of us, my other 12 peers and myself. But the point I'm trying to make here is that if you wish to make a transformation and move towards servant leadership, it is up to you, and it makes a big difference. You can make a big difference. If everybody starts saying that, look, the chairman and managing director of the group needs to change first, only then will I change, I don't think that works. So, Manjeera, the answer to your question is yes, I actually did move and practice towards servant leadership, and it made a huge difference. And there were a few of my colleagues also who did it. I must say that. And I will also say that, one of my current coaching engagements is with one of the world's largest food companies. And the CEO of that company in India actually is the sponsor. And he told me that for me, culture trumps competence. So the whole thing about, if you, so I think it's changing, and I'm very, very, how shall I put it, happy to see that in a number of organizations today, we are moving slowly but steadily towards servant leadership. So Maria, my question to you was, I just quickly checked, you've got a lot of YouTube videos. I'm going to see a couple of them and figure out which are the ones I'm going to share with some of my coaches and coachees, and I'm sure everybody else would like to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chan. Really appreciate it.
I'm sorry, Suresh was one of the first to ask a question and I didn't really come to him. Suresh, apologies. Would you please come in? Has he signed off? Bridge, can you see Suresh?
I think he's left.
He's left, Manjeera.
Because it's past 12. So
Okay. So time for the last question. Who would like to come in?
May I, Manjita?
Please, Bridge. I mean,
Maria, this whole movement about servant leadership started about 40 years ago, 35, 40 years ago.
Yes.
I think in between there was a lull period, and last 8-10 years, it is again surfaced back very strongly. Can you share your perspective on that?
Yes, it's true. There was a gap, Bridge. You are so conscious about the reality. There was a gap. So in between, there are actually a couple of gaps, if I may say so, in terms of research. So there are different topics in terms of the gap, right? So in terms of research, I was just running recently a data point. There was actually about a 5-year gap starting 2018, if I have my memory correctly, based on the database that I was running just now, a statistical database, about 2018-19, just before COVID, it kind of stopped. And then in terms of research, okay? Because it's when us researchers, for those of you that have done a lot of research, when we do research, we do face-to-face or whatever, but I didn't stop that. I personally didn't stop there. I did a lot of virtual research. So I connected with people via Zoom or other technology, but a lot of academicians stopped researching and publishing. And then it's picking up again in 2022. Now that's as it relates to research. But like what Bridge was saying, I think on the practical terms, there was about a 20 to 25 year of quietness on servant leadership in terms of speaking about it, practicing it, or being just aware about it. I don't know why. So research, I know why, but I actually don't know why. But because people are actually picking up other characteristics in behavior that they thought, oh, I'm going to expand on this, and this becomes the key thing, my mantra of life, right? And that's also influenced by the last 20, 25 years. You've got a lot of keynote speakers. You've got technology that makes them be more aware. You've got YouTube coming up. You've got Twitter. You've got people all of a sudden the past 10, 15 years spectrum becoming thought leaders and so forth, right? You're not really looking at research so much because people don't have the time. What you actually get is, these quick fixes. What's the cool thing for me to learn today, right? And technology is helping us to do that, right? So mobile phones, they became this size, the mouse size, about 20 years ago. I know that because I came from technology. My corporate life used to be mobile phones, technology, carriers, yeah? So that telecom was my industry before I became a learning and development consultant. So when technology, physical technology came up, I can just get information on my hand, then this whole thing started to shift, right? So research also went into transformational leadership. Why? Rather than servant leadership, because there was this concept that Manjira was saying, why servant? We want to be leaders. So there was this adaptation time where everybody wants to be a leader. Nobody wants to follow, right? So what does that actually mean? So with that, everybody was talking about transformational leader. In fact, it was this wave. And then I stopped again because, wait a minute, transformational leader is great if you're charismatic. But then what are we really focusing on? When you go deep dive into servant leadership is not subservient. Servant leadership is a strong human being. He or she knows what they stand for. They're purpose-oriented, and they have two major focuses. Number one, am I growing you if you are interacting with me? Number two, are you feeling better after interacting with me? That's it. That's servant leadership. So, gentlemen, the gentleman that you were just sharing right now, and you said, yes, we are all servant leaders if we wake up to it and we just take on the servant leadership hat and start applying. In every single interaction, you're a servant leader. So Servant leadership is coming back right now, straight after COVID, because people have had enough. That's it, because they are saying, we deserve better. It's self-worth time. I follow you if you are worth my following. That's it. Thank you,
So,
Rich.
Maria,
Very valid, very valid.
So Maria, my question is, with another set of crises looming on our head, would it again go into the back seat? Because what I've seen is liberal values get attention when there is peace in the world. The moment there is a crisis or something to be capitalized on, liberal, something else, you go into transformational leadership or something else. So what's your point? With all the current crisis coming up, do you think again it will take a back seat?
You are very, very observant. If you have crisis, you need a strong leader that gives direction. A servant leader gives direction when it's necessary. Number two.
Maria,
yeah,
I completely agree. What you're describing is utopia. What you're describing is should be. The point that Satinder is making is the alarming and frightening rise of the right wing in every country, including countries like the United States, which has always prided itself on, its liberty and equality and, what should I say, progressive values. I mean, look what's happening in the US. So what happens to this kind of leadership, so-called soft leadership, collaborative, participative, but seen as soft.
Yeah. So servant leadership is not soft at all. Because they don't have servant leaders, look at what is happening, right? They're very self-serving leaders. And starting from Trump is the most visible one, right? Again, the American politics, I don't want to go into it because I'm not an expert in it, but there are a lot of decision makers, right? The president is not necessarily the veto human being. That being said, you saw the power of Trump, right? So basically what I'm trying to say here is a servant leader is a very conscious person that is extremely strong in terms of what they are serving as purpose. So they don't deviate. Yeah. Now, can you have other leadership styles inside? Let's say I'm practicing servant leadership, but right now there's something else I need to pay attention to. I am still focused as a servant leader. I'm serving you, but can I bring another leadership style to collaborate with servant leadership? Absolutely. I do that all the time.
Thank you, Maria.
All the time. Yeah.
Thank you. Ravi has a question, please. Ravi, over to you.
Yeah, actually, more of an observation, which was triggered by Bridget's question and the discussion which happened in the last 5 minutes. About 15 years ago, I was with British Petroleum. I was actually with Castrol, and Castrol became part of British Petroleum. I was in Singapore as part of a global team, and was part of a top 30 or top 50 leadership assessment. And actually, the consultant with the study did list 7 or 8 styles, and servant leadership was mentioned as one of the styles. So going back to Oscar's point right at the beginning, in the discussion which followed, there was almost a tacit conclusion that servant leadership is not going to work in the company at that point in time. So this brings me to my pet theory once again that, organizations are doing a lot for diversity. That's focusing on race, gender. Very little is being done on style diversity. There is still a view that leadership style should be of a certain type, and varying leadership styles are still something which companies are struggling with. That's the point I wanted to make, actually.
Yes,
you are
pretty
right.
much like.
You're right, yes.
Yeah, pretty much like charismatic leaders were the only extrovert. Introverts were not considered at all. Yeah, good point.
Sadhna, you have been posting a question. Would you like to speak up, please? Sadhna?
Yeah, hello, Maria. That was a very insightful meet. I'm repeating what everyone else has said.
Thank you.
But I had a question which I would like, if you can throw some light into it. You described a story, a situation that, you had a real situation with one of your coaches. The lady who was in the organization for a long time, who created a budget which caused her leader or her CEO to get, you could say, pulled up in the boardroom. What was the missing component there, or what was the outcome? Is it something you can share?
Yes, of course. I actually had prepared the outcome for you, but then we took questions first, you know. So yes, I wanted to finish the story. Satna, thank you so much for bringing me back to the story. So the outcome of the outcome of the story was the following. Peter, it's hard, right? But Peter basically got his you know, he did a bit of a self-reflection. He said, oh my gosh, you know, what did I do? So he went back, he sat Jenny down, and they had a one-on-one where he deeply apologized with remorse what he was doing. He listened without talking, because that's what I told him. I actually did a rehearsal with him. It's like, listen, don't talk, don't make excuses. And then in addition to that, pick up from what she says and suggest to start from scratch. And really recount all of the things that you appreciate in your partnership together. It's not praising her only, it's really recount how far you went in these 8 months as partners. And you believe that, you know, there's more to be done in terms of success, collaborative success. So he did that. In addition to that, he focused again what servant leadership was all about. And he believes in it and he acts on it, right? Again, he uses other leadership styles, but there he went back, I forgot about servant leadership. That's why this happened, right? So what is it? What is it? I asked him, what do you know about servant leadership? We've been talking about it, you know, and then he goes, I wasn't serving her. At that moment, I was thinking about me. I should have, before going to the board, before giving her the project alone to deliver a huge budget for the center, I should have asked her, have you designed a budget before? I know she has managed a budget, which means check, 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 but she never designed a budget. She doesn't know what it entails to do an effect, to create an evidence-based budget. She had no clue. So I said, okay, so basically you're using situational leadership on top of servant leadership. She said, yes, I wasn't serving her. So what I did, he said, what I did was, my purpose is still to serve her, groom her. So I should have developed her. I also, I'm going to apologize because I want to create a sense of well-being. Again, servant leadership is just two things. Groom the person, develop the person, create a sense of well-being in every single interaction. It was a one interaction of 5 minutes and it wasn't good. So now he has to repair it. That's it. So in this conversation that he went back to her, they were hugging each other afterwards because they have that level of trust already. It was just broken. That's all.
Thank you, Maria. Maria,
thank you.
The president of the CFI Northern Region chapter, Manik Chakravarti, who we all very respectfully call Manikta, which is, you know, elder brother Manik. I would request him to come in here. Manikta, any questions that you have, and to close off the meeting with a word of thanks to Maria. Manikta, you're on mute. You're on mute, please.
No questions, Maria. There is no question at all. It was an overwhelming and fantastic session.
Thank you.
The only thing is that I think we have started nurturing the insatiable desire of listening to your future research findings.
Thank
so
you.
Whenever you feel free, I think you don't mind for us to take liberty to nudge you at times.
Yes.
Can we get something more than what you have shared with us?
Okay, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, effort, and also the education that you imparted on us. I think that our audience has been quite silent and quite engaging. It is very difficult for us to get such an obedient audience because the material was so much that they were putting in undivided attention to it.
No,
Thank all the participants, all the people who have come and joined in a huge number. It was a great pleasure for our chapter and for us. and also for CFI. I'm sure it will be reckoned as one of the great webinars. Thanks, Maria, once again.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Bridge.
And
I was
Bridge.
just thinking
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Great.
you. Wonderful.
I'll be in touch. Thank you so
Bye,
much.
guys.
Thank
Signing
you.
off
Thank you.
now.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Manjira,
you.
for great moderation. Thank you.
Have a good weekend. Thank you, Manjira. Thank you. Thank you,
Bye,
Bridge.
Maria.
Thank you, Sanjita.
Bye,
Thank you,
Maria.
Mani.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Thank you. Sangeeta, thanks for the great help.
Thank you. Thank you. Enjoy your beverage.
Oh, thank you.